the largest moving object ever built, a palace of steel, deemed unsinkable. On that night, the sea was like glass. But beneath the surface, an ancient danger lurked. A blade of ice, waiting. Above deck, silence. But below, the damage was catastrophic. In seconds, theory became deadly reality. Forget the movies. This is the technical truth about the end of the Titanic.
You think you know the story of the Titanic, right? A majestic ship, a massive iceberg, a historic tragedy. But what if I told you that hiding just below the surface of that story is a much more fascinating one? It's a cold case, really, an investigation into the physics, the materials, and a series of engineering failures that doomed the unsinkable ship from the very start. Okay, let's dive right into the central mystery here. The actual damage to the ship was, in the grand scheme of things, unbelievably small. We're talking about a total opening smaller than a single doorway. So how on earth did that lead to one of the greatest maritime disasters in history? To figure it out, we've got to follow the evidence. And the very first clue is found in the moment of impact itself.
So, let's go back to 11:40 p.m., April 14th, 1912. Now, for a collision that's about to sink a ship this enormous, you'd expect a massive, violent crash, right? A huge jolt. But for the people on board, it was something else entirely.
That's how one survivor described it. Can you believe that? Not a shattering crash, but a slight shudder, a faint grinding noise. You know, in the first-class dining room, some of the staff barely even noticed anything happened. And this very quiet, almost gentle beginning is what makes the catastrophic ending so completely baffling.
For decades, this was the image we all had in our heads, thanks to movies and legends. The idea that the iceberg acted like a giant can opener, just tearing this massive 300-foot gash down the side of the ship. It's a really dramatic image for sure, but it's totally wrong.
The truth, which we've confirmed with modern ultrasound scans of the wreck, is way more shocking. The total damage area was only about 12 square feet. Think about that. It wasn't one giant hole. It was a series of small punctures and pop seams along the hull. And that right there is the million-dollar question. If the hull was that small, the ship should have been fine. It should have survived. Which brings us to our first major clue, a critical vulnerability that was literally holding the entire ship together.
Okay, so this is where our investigation takes a turn. We stop looking at the size of the wound and start looking at the strength of the ship's skin. All the evidence starts to point to a critical weakness in the 3 million rivets that were supposed to hold the steel hull plates together.
And this slide, this right here, shows the ship's fatal flaw, clear as day. The main body of the ship was put together with high-quality steel rivets, strong stuff. But at the bow and the stern, the exact areas that made contact with the ice, the builders used lower-grade wrought iron rivets. And these rivets were full of something called slag, which is a glassy impurity that basically creates tiny microscopic cracks inside the metal. In the freezing cold water of the Atlantic, those iron rivets became incredibly brittle.
So get this, the iceberg didn't slice the Titanic open. It was more like a series of heavy bumps. But the immense pressure from those bumps was enough to cause the heads of those cold, brittle rivets to just snap right off. Imagine the buttons popping off a shirt. That's what happened. The seams between the steel plates just opened up, and the Atlantic Ocean started pouring in.
But hang on a second. Even with a few leaking seams, a state-of-the-art ship like this should have been able to handle it. Which brings us to the second fatal flaw, a flaw hidden within the Titanic's most famous safety feature, its so-called watertight compartments.
This was the heart of the unsinkable claim. The ship was basically a series of separate, sealed-off chambers. The idea was that if a few of them got breached and flooded, the others would stay dry and keep the ship afloat. A pretty smart design, in theory.
And the design was tough. The Titanic could have stayed afloat with its first 4 compartments completely full of water, no problem. But the iceberg didn't damage 4 compartments, it damaged 6. And that pushed the ship 2 compartments past its breaking point, setting off an unstoppable chain reaction.
And this, right here, is what truly doomed the Titanic. See, the watertight bulkheads, the walls between the compartments, they weren't sealed at the top. They only went up a few decks. So as the first 6 compartments filled with water, the bow got heavier and was pulled down into the ocean. The water level inside rose up, until it reached the top of the bulkhead wall and just spilled over into the next compartment, and then the next one, and the next one. It was exactly like overfilling one section of an ice cube tray. The water just keeps spilling over until the whole tray is full. The ship was literally flooding itself from the inside out.
At this point, the bow is filled with tens of thousands of tons of seawater. The sinking is absolutely inevitable. But the ship's final ordeal was just beginning. It was about to undergo a test of pure physics, a brutal stress test it was never, ever designed to withstand.
You know, for decades, people dismissed the survivors who claimed the ship broke apart. They said it was just panic and confusion. But when the wreck was finally discovered in 1985, there it was, lying in two distinct pieces on the ocean floor. Their terrifying stories were true all along. So, what happened?
As the bow, now incredibly heavy with water, plunged downwards, the stern, which was still full of air and buoyant, was lifted right up out of the ocean. It rose higher and higher to an incredible, terrifying angle, somewhere between 30 and 45 degrees. This put an amount of stress on the middle of the ship that is just unimaginable.
That is the sound of a complete and total structural failure. Just picture it. The immense weight of the water-filled bow is pulling down, trying to drag the ship to the bottom, while the air-filled stern is being pushed up by the ocean's buoyancy. The hull was caught in this epic tug-of-war, and it just couldn't take the strain. With a sound that reportedly echoed for miles across the calm ocean, the ship tore itself apart before making its final plunge.
So, after looking at all the evidence, what's the final verdict? What really sank the Titanic? The truth is, it was never just one thing.
It was a perfect storm of failures. You start with reckless speed in an area known for ice. That speed then meets inferior materials at the point of impact. That small breach is then made catastrophic by a flawed safety design. And finally, the simple laws of physics step in to deliver the crushing final blow. Each problem made the next one worse, turning what could have been a manageable accident into a total disaster in just 2 hours and 40 minutes. As terrible as it was, the disaster served as a brutal but powerful wake-up call to the world. In its aftermath, maritime safety was completely transformed. The SOLAS Convention was created, setting international standards for everything: lifeboat capacity, emergency procedures, ship construction, rules that are still in effect and are still saving lives to this day. So in the end, the Iceberg didn't sink the Titanic. It was just the catalyst. The ship was really sunk by a chain of small, overlooked flaws, brittle materials, a compromised design, a reckless procedure that all came together to create one single catastrophic point of failure. And it leaves you with a pretty chilling thought, doesn't it? What small flaws in the complex systems we all rely on today are we overlooking? And what seems unsinkable to us now might just be one cold night away from disaster.